I'm Samantha Parker, 28 years old, and 6 years of my life just vanished in a single mouse click. The $120,000 I saved for my Stanford MBA dream, gone. My parents transferred every penny to my sister Brielle's account for her dream house down payment. I stared at my empty bank balance hands, shaking as my entire future crumbled. The worst part, when I confronted them, they actually expected me to understand. I never imagined my own family would betray me so completely. Before I continue this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories of people fighting back against those who wronged them. Growing up in suburban Chicago with Thomas and Julia Parker as my parents should have been the foundation for a happy childhood. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect American family: father, working as a financial consultant, mother running her boutique interior design business, and two daughters excelling in their own ways. But beneath that polished exterior, there was always an unspoken hierarchy in our household. From my earliest memories, I recognized that my younger sister Brielle and I occupied different positions in our parents' hearts. Brielle was 3 years younger, artistically gifted, outgoing, and effortlessly charming. With her natural social grace and creative talents, she captivated everyone she met, especially our parents. I was the responsible one, the planner, the academic achiever who brought home straight A's and organized the family calendar by age 12. Our birthday celebrations told the story clearly. For my 16th birthday, I received a practical gift card and a small family dinner. 3 years later, when Brielle turned 16, my parents threw an elaborate garden party with professional photography and custom decorations that my mother spent weeks planning. When I brought home academic awards, my father would nod approvingly and say, "That's expected from you, Samantha." But when Brielle received any recognition for her artwork, no matter how minor, it warranted special celebration dinners and enthusiastic phone calls to every relative. The rules in our house bent differently for each of us, too. My curfew was strictly enforced throughout high school, while Brielle's was treated as a flexible suggestion. When I needed a car to drive to my part-time job during senior year, I was told to save for it myself. 2 years later, Brielle received a used but reliable car as a motivation gift to encourage her artistic pursuits. Despite these differences, I convinced myself that my parents loved us equally. They just showed it differently. I told myself that Brielle needed more encouragement and attention because she was more sensitive, more creative. I was the strong one who could handle independence. This rationalization became my emotional survival strategy, a story I repeated to myself when the favoritism became too obvious to ignore. Financial independence came early for me by necessity. At 16, I started working weekends at a local bookstore, carefully saving half of every paycheck. By senior year, I was working almost 30 hours weekly between school and my job, maintaining my GPA, while building my first serious savings account. When college acceptance letters arrived, the pattern continued. My parents contributed a modest amount toward my education at the state university, covering about a quarter of my expenses. The rest came from scholarships I'd worked hard to secure and my own savings. Meanwhile, they fully funded Brielle's education at an exclusive private art and design school in New York, including her apartment in a trendy neighborhood and a generous monthly allowance. My college years studying business administration were a balancing act between maintaining my scholarship with perfect grades and working part-time to cover living expenses. While other students enjoyed the full college experience, I was calculating budgets and picking up extra shifts during breaks. I graduated with honors, one of the top students in my program, having already secured an entry-level position at a respected marketing firm in Chicago. Throughout these years, one person consistently recognized my potential and supported my ambitions without conditions: my Uncle Jake, my father's older brother. Unlike my father, Jake had built his success from nothing, working his way through law school and establishing himself as a respected corporate attorney. During family gatherings, while my parents focused on Brielle's latest creative endeavors, Uncle Jake would seek me out, asking thoughtful questions about my studies and career goals. He became the mentor I desperately needed, offering guidance based on his own experience navigating the business world. It was during my junior year of college that the seed of my MBA dream was planted. At a networking event organized by my department, I met Alicia Brennan, a Stanford Business School alumna, who had transformed a small regional company into a national brand within 5 years of graduating. The strategic thinking she described, the doors the program had opened, and the confidence with which she navigated complex business challenges. It all resonated deeply with me. That night, I researched the Stanford program until 3 a.m., captivated by the possibilities it represented. Stanford MBA graduates don't just find jobs, Alicia had told me. They create the future of business. Those words echoed in my mind as I fell asleep that night, a new dream taking shape that would direct my actions for the next 6 years. After graduating college, I threw myself into building my career at Meridian Marketing in Chicago. Starting as an account coordinator, I quickly distinguished myself through a combination of analytical thinking, attention to detail, and willingness to take on the projects no one else wanted. By my second year, I'd been promoted twice and was managing small accounts independently. My superiors noted my unusual ability to understand both the creative and financial aspects of campaigns, a skill set that positioned me for leadership roles. While my career advanced, I lived with singular focus and discipline. Unlike my colleagues who moved into trendy downtown apartments and enjoyed Chicago's vibrant social scene, I chose a modest one-bedroom in a less fashionable neighborhood with good public transportation. I brought lunch from home, limited dinners out to once a month, and developed a reputation for being the person who could suggest the best free events in the city. Every decision was filtered through one question: will this bring me closer to Stanford? 6 months after starting my job, I opened a dedicated savings account that I named Stanford MBA Fund in my banking app. I set up automatic transfers of $800 from each paycheck, increasing the amount with every raise and bonus. I tracked my progress in a spreadsheet, calculating exactly how long it would take to reach my goal of $120,000, enough to cover tuition and basic living expenses for the 2-year program. The day I reached $50,000 in savings around my third work anniversary, I allowed myself a small celebration. A single glass of champagne in my apartment, watching the sunset over the Chicago skyline. At $75,000, I began serious research into the application process, joining online forums for aspiring MBA students and connecting with Stanford alumni on professional networking sites. By the time my balance hit $100,000 after 5 years of saving, I began working with an admissions consultant to strengthen my application using a small portion of my savings as an investment in making the rest count. Throughout this period, Uncle Jake remained my steadfast supporter. During our monthly lunch meetings, he would review my career progress and saving strategy, occasionally suggesting investment adjustments to maximize returns on my growing fund. Education is the one thing no one can ever take away from you, Samantha, he would remind me. This investment in yourself will pay dividends for decades. When the balance finally reached $120,000 after 6 years of disciplined saving, I treated myself to dinner at the restaurant where I'd met Alicia Brennan years before. Sitting alone at my table, I took a photo of my banking app showing the balance, tangible proof that dedication and sacrifice could transform dreams into achievable goals. Every few weeks during our traditional Sunday family dinners, I would mention my progress towards Stanford. These announcements were typically met with polite but unenthusiastic responses. My father would inevitably suggest alternatives. The University of Chicago has an excellent business program, and you could keep your job, or executive MBA programs let you earn while you learn. My mother would nod along, adding that California is so far away and the cost of living is outrageous. Brielle's reactions were less subtle. "I can't believe you're going to waste all that money just to get another piece of paper," she said, once twirling pasta around her fork. "Do you know how many incredible experiences you could have with that kind of money? You could travel the world for a year." Her perspective on money had been shaped by very different experiences than mine in her world. Money was something that appeared when needed, not something requiring years of sacrifice to accumulate. I learned to share less about my MBA plans during these family gatherings, saving my enthusiasm for conversations with Uncle Jake or my few close friends who understood the significance of this goal. Instead, I channeled my energy into perfecting my application, securing glowing recommendations from supervisors, and preparing for the GMAT exam with the same intensity that had characterized my entire approach. When the email from Stanford arrived, "Congratulations on your admission to the Stanford Graduate School of Business MBA program," I was alone in my apartment, having taken a rare day off work to nervously refresh my inbox. The validation was overwhelming. Years of sacrifice of saying no to vacations, and nights out of living below my means, while my peers enjoyed the fruits of their early career success. It had all been worthwhile. I was going to Stanford. That weekend, I drafted my resignation letter, planning to give my employer a generous 3-month notice. I calculated the final transfers needed to move my emergency fund to California and researched housing options near campus. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to look beyond the goal that had consumed me, to imagine the life that awaited on the other side. The future I had worked so hard to create was finally within reach. The Wednesday before I planned to submit my resignation letter, I logged into my bank account during lunch to finalize some details for my relocation budget. I needed to determine exactly how much I could allocate for housing deposits, moving expenses, and settling in costs before the program began. What I saw on my screen seemed impossible, a zero balance in my Stanford MBA fund account. My first thought was that I had somehow logged into the wrong account. I logged out and back in again, my heart beginning to race. Same result. I checked my transaction history, and there it was, a transfer of the entire $120,000 to another account 2 days earlier. An account I didn't recognize. Panic rising, I immediately called the bank's customer service line, stepping into an empty conference room for privacy. The representative confirmed what I feared: the money had indeed been transferred out of my account. "Was my account hacked?" I asked, voice shaking. "No, Ms. Parker. The transfer was authorized using your personal information and security questions," the representative explained. "It appears the funds were transferred to an account belonging to Thomas and Julia Parker. Are these individuals known to you?" My parents. My parents had taken my money. The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Yes, they're my parents," I managed to say. "But I didn't authorize any transfer." The representative's voice softened with sympathy. "I see they've been co-signers on this account since it was opened when you were 17. Legally, they have access rights, though it's unusual for co-signers to make withdrawals of this size without communication." After ending the call, I sat motionless in the conference room, trying to make sense of what had happened. There had to be a logical explanation. Perhaps they had moved the money to a higher-yield investment account as a surprise, trying to help me maximize my savings in the final months before Stanford. Maybe there was some kind of security concern with my current bank, and they'd moved the funds temporarily. I called my father's cell phone, then my mother's. Both went to voicemail. I sent text messages to both. "Need to talk ASAP about my bank account. Please call me immediately." Then I somehow made it through the rest of my workday on autopilot, checking my phone every few minutes for a response. That evening, I drove directly to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Both their cars were in the driveway, along with a third I didn't recognize. I rang the doorbell, fighting to stay calm until I heard their explanation. My mother answered her expression immediately, telling me everything I needed to know. She wasn't surprised to see me. She had been expecting this confrontation. "Samantha, come in," she said quietly. "Your father and I need to talk to you." In the living room, my father sat stiffly in his usual armchair. Brielle was curled up on the sofa, looking uncomfortable but not confused. They knew. They all knew. "What's going on?" I demanded, remaining standing. "Why was every dollar of my savings transferred to your account 2 days ago?" My father cleared his throat. "Samantha, please sit down. We can explain." "I'd rather stand. Explain what exactly? How my entire future disappeared overnight." My mother perched on the arm of my father's chair, a united front. Honey, we had to make a difficult decision as a family. We borrowed your savings temporarily for something important. Borrowed, without asking me, without even telling me. My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. That money is my future. My Stanford tuition is due in less than 3 weeks. That's what we need to discuss. My father said, his business negotiation voice in full effect. We use the money as a down payment on a house. A house? What house? I looked between them in confusion. Brielle finally spoke, her voice small but not apologetic. My house? Well, my dream house. The one in Maple Heights I've had my eye on. It came on the market suddenly, and there were already other offers, so we had to act fast. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. You stole my Stanford money to buy Brielle a house. We didn't steal anything, my father said sharply. And watch your tone, Samantha. We're still your parents. Parents don't empty their child's life savings without permission. I was shouting now, unable to contain the rage and betrayal flooding through me. My mother stepped in, her voice soothing in the way she used with difficult design clients. Sweetheart Brielle has been going through so much since her breakup with Justin. Her therapist said a stable home environment would be crucial for her emotional well-being. When her dream house became available, we knew it was meant to be, but we were short on liquid assets for the down payment. Oh, you took mine. The words felt like stones in my mouth. We borrowed yours, my father corrected. We'll pay you back eventually. You can postpone Stanford for a year or two while we sort out our finances. The program isn't going anywhere. Brielle stood up and approached me, her expression a practiced mix of gratitude and sympathy that probably worked wonders at her gallery openings. Sam, I can't tell you how much this means to me. You're helping me rebuild my life after everything fell apart. I promise, when you visit, you'll see it was worth it. The house has a perfect guest room overlooking the garden that you can use whenever you want. I stared at her in disbelief. You think I care about a guest room? I've been working towards Stanford for 6 years. 6 years of saving every penny, saying no to vacations, living in a tiny apartment, all for this opportunity. And you took it from me for a house that what just had to have right now. It's not just any house, Brielle insisted, genuine emotion breaking through. It's the fresh start I need. You know how devastated I've been. This house represents my independence, my recovery. And what about my independence, my future? Did any of you consider that for even a second? I looked at each of their faces, searching for any sign of real remorse. My father sighed heavily. Samantha, you've always been so capable, so self-sufficient. We knew you'd figure something out. There are student loans, scholarships. I already explored all those options. That's why I saved the money myself instead of going into massive debt. The room was spinning now, my carefully constructed future crumbling around me. Stanford won't wait. If I don't pay the deposit in 3 weeks, I lose my spot. Do you understand what you've done? My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Honey, sometimes family needs to come first. Brielle needs this now. Your MBA can wait a little while. The casual dismissal of my dream, the assumption that my goals were less important, less urgent than Brielle's desire for a specific house. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being second place in my own family. This is unforgivable, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I need that money back. All of it. Now. We can't do that, my father said flatly. The down payment has been made. The closing is next week. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Then I'll find another way. But this conversation isn't over. I walked out, ignoring their calls to come back and discuss it further. In my car, I finally broke down, sobbing against the steering wheel as the magnitude of the betrayal sank in. Through my tears, I called the Stanford admissions office, desperately hoping for options. The sympathetic administrator explained that while they understood personal emergencies, they couldn't hold my spot without the deposit. If I couldn't pay, they would offer my place to someone on the wait list. We hope to see you in a future cohort, Ms. Parker, she said kindly. Your application was very impressive. Future cohort, future dreams. Everything I had worked for postponed indefinitely because my sister wanted a house with a garden view. For the next week, my parents and sister might as well have vanished. My calls went unanswered. My texts received brief, non-committal replies about giving everyone space to process. I took 2 personal days from work, unable to focus on marketing strategies while my life imploded. Instead, I met with a financial advisor recommended by a colleague, hoping for some miracle solution. Unfortunately, Ms. Parker, while what your parents did was ethically questionable, it appears to be legally permissible, the advisor explained, reviewing my account documentation. Since they remained co-signers on the account you opened as a minor, they technically had authorized access. It's unusual and inappropriate, but not criminal under these circumstances. So they can just take my money with no consequences? I asked in disbelief. Your recourse would be civil rather than criminal, a lawsuit against your own parents, which comes with significant emotional and relationship costs, as I'm sure you understand. I understood all too well. Even in this ultimate betrayal, I was expected to prioritize family harmony above my own interests. The familiar pattern continued. After 9 days of avoidance, I decided direct confrontation was my only option. I drove to my parents' house on Sunday evening, normally our family dinner time, knowing they would be home. This time I didn't call ahead. This time I wouldn't leave without concrete answers. My mother opened the door with a resigned expression. "We were wondering when you'd come by," she said, leading me to the dining room where my father sat reviewing papers. Brielle was notably absent. "I need a repayment plan," I said without preamble. "Exact amounts and dates. I've lost my spot at Stanford for this year, but I can reapply for next year's cohort if I can show proof of funds." My father looked up, his expression a practiced blend of authority and conciliation that he used in business negotiations. "Samantha, we understand you're upset, but demanding isn't productive. We're family, not business associates." "You made this a business transaction when you took my money without consent," I replied coldly. "Now I need to know exactly when and how you'll return it." My parents exchanged glances, having clearly discussed their position beforehand. "We can start making monthly payments toward the total next year," my mother offered, "once Brielle is settled and our finances adjust to the new mortgage." Next year, monthly payments. At what rate, over how many years? The absurdity of their proposal hit me. "I didn't agree to give you a no-interest loan for my sister's house." "We're doing the best we can, Samantha." My father said, his patience visibly thinning. "We've already spent an additional $30,000 helping Brielle furnish the house properly. These things take time." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You spent more money on furniture when you haven't even started repaying what you took from me." "The house needed to be livable," my mother explained, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "Brielle needed her fresh start to be complete." I sank into a chair, momentarily speechless. The depth of their favoritism had never been so nakedly exposed. "Where is Brielle now?" I finally asked. "She's hosting a small gathering at the new house," my mother replied. "Just a few friends to help her feel at home. You should stop by later. Seeing the house might help you understand why this was so important." I declined the invitation with silent disbelief. 2 days later, the final insult arrived when my cousin sent me a confused text. "Missed you at Brielle's housewarming yesterday. Epic party. Your parents seemed so proud giving everyone tours. Why didn't you tell me she bought a house?" I discovered through social media that what my mother had described as a small gathering had been an elaborate housewarming party for at least 50 people. In photos, my parents beamed beside Brielle as she showed off her gourmet kitchen and custom closets. One caption read, "Dreams do come true. So grateful to my amazing parents for making this possible. #blessed, #dream house, #new beginnings." Not a word about where the down payment had come from. Not a mention of the dream sacrifice for her new kitchen island. The next day brought the discovery that truly broke me. While reviewing options with another financial advisor, she asked about my credit history and existing loans. "It's unusual that you were denied a bridge loan with your income and credit score. Did you already have a mortgage that affected your debt-to-income ratio?" "No," I explained. "I rent my apartment. I was saving everything for Stanford." "What about co-signed loans?" Sometimes parents co-signing for other properties can impact your borrowing capacity. A horrible suspicion formed. A few inquiries confirmed that my parents had not only provided the down payment from my funds, but had also co-signed Brielle's mortgage, something they had flatly refused to do when I purchased my car 3 years earlier. "We don't believe in co-signing loans," my father had lectured then. "It creates unhealthy financial dependency." Unless it was for Brielle, apparently. That evening, I received an email from Stanford with the subject line, "Final Notice Tuition Payment Deadline." It outlined that if payment wasn't received within 7 days, my admission would be formally rescinded, and I would need to reapply as a new candidate if I wished to be considered for future programs. Desperate, I applied for personal loans from 3 different banks, despite the advisor's warning about approval odds. As predicted, all 3 rejected my application. The loan amount was too large relative to my income, and I had insufficient collateral. One loan officer suggested a co-signer would solve the problem, a suggestion that felt like salt in an open wound. That night alone in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to fully feel the magnitude of what had happened. I curled up on my bathroom floor and sobbed until no more tears would come. The ultimate betrayal by the people who should have supported me most, leaving me hollow and alone. 3 weeks after discovering the theft, I had stopped answering calls from family members and had begun avoiding social gatherings where relatives might be present. I couldn't bear their innocent questions about my Stanford plans, nor did I want to explain the betrayal I was still struggling to comprehend myself. On a Tuesday morning, I was huddled in a corner booth of a coffee shop near my apartment, reviewing a spreadsheet of alternative MBA programs with significantly lower tuition requirements. None offered the opportunities or connections of Stanford, but I was trying to salvage some version of my dream from the wreckage. I was so absorbed that I didn't notice someone approaching until they spoke. "Samantha, I thought that was you." I looked up to find Uncle Jake standing beside my table, briefcase in hand, concern evident in his expression. "Your mother mentioned you missed the last 2 Sunday dinners." "That's not like you," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" I nodded silently, closing my laptop. Jake ordered a coffee and settled across from me, studying my face. "You look exhausted, Sam. What's going on? And don't tell me nothing. I've known you since you were born." Something about his genuine concern broke through the protective shell I'd constructed. Before I could stop myself, the entire story poured out: the discovery of the empty account, my parents' casual dismissal of my dreams, the devastating loss of my Stanford admission, and the ongoing refusal to make meaningful amends. As I spoke, Uncle Jake's expression transformed from concern to shock to cold anger. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his coffee untouched. "I knew your father played favorites, but this," he finally said, shaking his head, "this crosses every line." "They don't even seem to understand what they've done," I said, my voice hollow. "They talk about borrowing the money as if taking my entire future without asking was just a minor courtesy they overlooked." Jake leaned forward, his expression grave. "Samantha, there's something you need to know about your family history. Something I've kept quiet about for years, out of respect for your father. But this situation changes everything." He explained that my grandparents, his and my father's parents, had established modest trust funds for both their sons when they sold their small manufacturing business 30 years ago. The funds weren't life-changing, but they provided significant financial security. "Thomas received the same amount I did," Jake explained. "But while I invested mine and lived within my means, your father has been systematically draining his fund for years, primarily to support Brielle's lifestyle and your mother's business ventures." "You're saying they've had money all along?" "While I worked multiple jobs through college." The betrayal deepened with each revelation. "Not unlimited money, but enough that they should never have needed to touch your savings," Jake confirmed. "I've watched the pattern for years, the extravagant support for Brielle, while you worked yourself to exhaustion, the different standards, the unequal investment in your futures. I've tried to provide some counterbalance to be the adult in your corner, but I never imagined they'd go this far." He pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. "This is Rachel Winters, a financial investigator who works with my firm. She's discreet, thorough, and doesn't tolerate financial abuse, which, make no mistake, is what this is." What could she possibly do? The financial advisor already told me they had legal access to the account. Legal access doesn't mean what they did was right or without consequences. Jake said, his attorney persona emerging. "Let me help you, Samantha. I've stood by too long watching this dynamic play out." The next afternoon, I met Jake at his downtown law office where Rachel Winters was waiting. Her methodical approach and matter-of-fact manner were reassuring as she took notes on my situation. "Co-signer or not, we have several angles to work with here," she explained after I finished. "First, there's the matter of intent. The account was clearly designated for your education, and they were aware of the purpose. Second, there's the timing. They acted deliberately when you were about to use the funds for their intended purpose. Third, there's the documented pattern of financial favoritism, which provides context for this action." Over the next 2 hours, the three of us developed a comprehensive strategy. Rachel would compile a complete financial history documenting the account's purpose, my consistent contributions, and the communication showing my parents were fully aware of my Stanford plans. Jake would prepare a formal legal demand letter outlining potential consequences if the funds weren't returned. "Your parents' business partnerships provide additional leverage," Jake explained. "Your father's consulting firm has an ethics clause in their partnership agreement that specifically addresses financial impropriety. Your mother's design business relies heavily on reputation and word of mouth. Neither can afford the kind of scrutiny this situation would bring if it became public." As they outlined the approach, I felt conflicted. This feels so extreme, threatening my own parents. "Ask yourself this," Jake said gently. "If they weren't your parents, if a business partner or roommate had taken your money this way, would you hesitate to take legal action?" "No, I wouldn't," I admitted. "The fact that they're family doesn't give them the right to destroy your future," Rachel added. "In fact, it makes their actions worse, not better. They exploited your trust and the access they had as your parents." Jake laid out a three-pronged approach: a formal demand letter detailing the potential legal and professional consequences of their actions, specific leverage points regarding their business relationships and community standing, a reasonable timeline for full repayment before further action. "And if that doesn't work?" I asked. "Then we move to phase 2 legal proceedings to recover the funds through their business assets," Jake explained. "I'm also prepared to offer you a personal loan as a last resort to meet your Stanford deadline, but I'd rather hold them accountable first." As the meeting concluded, I felt something shift inside me, a transformation from victim to advocate for myself. The path forward wouldn't be easy or comfortable, but for the first time since discovering the theft, I felt a glimmer of hope. "One more thing," Jake said as we were leaving. "This pattern won't stop unless you stop it. If they return the money, but you don't establish clear boundaries, they'll find other ways to prioritize Brielle at your expense. This isn't just about recovering funds, it's about changing the family dynamic permanently." His words resonated deeply. This wasn't just about Stanford anymore. It was about standing up for my worth in my own family. It was about breaking a lifetime pattern of sacrifice and acceptance. "I'm ready," I told him, and I meant it. The formal legal letter was delivered to my parents' home by courier on a Thursday morning. By noon, my phone was lighting up with calls and texts from both of them, ranging from confused to angry to pleading. I didn't respond to any, following Jake's advice to let the letter's contents sink in before engaging. Instead, I sent a single text message: "I'm available to discuss this with both of you at Uncle Jake's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. This meeting is non-negotiable if you want to resolve this situation." Choosing Jake's office rather than their home or a neutral location was strategic. It shifted the power dynamic and made clear this was a legal matter, not a family disagreement to be smoothed over with my mother's lasagna and my father's authoritative pronouncements. When my parents arrived at the office the next day, their faces showed the stress of the past 24 hours. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, while my father maintained a stiff defensive posture as they were shown into Jake's conference room, where he and I were already waiting. Rachel joined us minutes later with a folder of documents. "This is completely unnecessary, Samantha," my father began immediately, bringing lawyers into a family matter. "This stopped being just a family matter when you took $120,000 of my money without permission." I interrupted, my voice steadier than I expected. "You've left me no choice but to pursue formal channels." Jake took over, methodically presenting the evidence. Rachel had compiled bank statements showing my consistent deposits over 6 years, emails and texts, referencing my Stanford plan's documentation of my lost admission due to the missing funds, and a timeline of events showing the deliberate timing of their withdrawal. "Thomas, Julia, let's be clear about what happened here," Jake said to my parents. "You took funds you knew were earmarked for Samantha's education without her knowledge or consent to purchase a house for your other daughter. In any context outside of family, this would be considered fraud." "We always intended to pay it back," my mother protested weakly. "Intentions without concrete plans are meaningless," Rachel responded. "You've provided no timeline, no written agreement, and no security for repayment. Meanwhile, you've continued to spend additional funds on furnishings and celebrations for the property purchased with Samantha's money." My father's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. We're her parents. We supported her all her life." "Did you?" Jake countered, sliding forward a spreadsheet Rachel had prepared. "This analysis shows the financial support provided to each daughter since age 18. The disparity is striking, wouldn't you agree?" The document showed in black and white what I had always felt, but never quantified the vastly different levels of financial support my parents had provided to Brielle versus me. "This is different," my father insisted. "Brielle needs more support. She's an artist, her income is unpredictable. Samantha has always been independent and financially responsible. So she's being punished for her responsible behavior," Rachel noted, "while her sister is rewarded for needing constant financial rescue." The conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, my parents cycling through denial, blame shifting, and attempts to reframe their actions as well-intentioned support for a daughter in need. As their justifications weakened, a more troubling picture emerged. They had overextended themselves financially for years to maintain Brielle's lifestyle, while expecting me to support myself completely. Just as it seemed we might be making progress, the conference room door burst open. Brielle stormed in, eyes blazing. "What is wrong with you, Samantha?" she demanded. "Mom's been crying for hours. Dad can barely function. You're destroying our family over money." Jake remained perfectly calm. "Brielle, please take a seat if you wish to join this discussion. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to wait outside." To my surprise, she sat. Through her posture radiated indignation. "Since you're here," Rachel said, turning to a new page in her folder, "perhaps you can explain why you felt entitled to use your sister's education fund for your house down payment." "I didn't know the details," Brielle claimed, though her eyes darted away. "Mom and Dad said they would help with the house. I didn't ask where the money was coming from." My mother reached for her hand. "That's right. Brielle shouldn't be blamed for our decision." Jake nodded slowly. "Let's clarify everyone's understanding then." He produced copies of text messages between my parents, and Brielle obtained with my father's reluctant cooperation earlier in the meeting. One exchange clearly showed Brielle asking about Samantha's Stanford money and whether they could borrow from that for the house. Brielle's face flushed. "That was just a suggestion. I didn't think they'd actually do it. Yet when they did, you accepted it without question," I said quietly. "You knew what that money meant to me, Brielle. You knew how long I'd been saving." "I was going to pay you back too," she insisted. "Once my art career takes off." "Your speculative future art sales aren't a repayment plan," Rachel interjected. "And based on the financial records we've reviewed, you've received over $300,000 in family support since college, without any significant repayment to date." With each piece of evidence, my parents' position weakened. Finally, Jake presented them with 3 options. Immediate repayment through an equity line on their home legal proceedings that would include potential criminal implications and public record. Transfer of valuable family business shares to me as compensation. My father stared at the document for a long moment. "You would really do this to your own family, Samantha. You did this to our family when you stole my future," I replied, my voice breaking slightly. I'm just trying to salvage what's left of it. After tense negotiation and several private conferences between my parents, they finally agreed to the equity line option. Jake had already researched their home's value and available equity, confirming they could access the funds within days if they acted immediately. The agreement included significant penalties if they missed the repayment deadline. As Jake's assistant prepared the formal agreement for signatures, Brielle made one last emotional appeal. "This is destroying our family," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Is Stanford really worth that to you? Worth tearing apart everything we have?" The question hung in the air for a moment before I found my voice. "This isn't about Stanford anymore, Brielle. This is about respect and equality in our family. For my entire life, I've watched my achievements be minimized while yours were celebrated. I've accepted less while you received more. I've worked multiple jobs while you received allowances. I've lived within my means while you spent freely, knowing our parents would cover the difference." I took a deep breath before continuing. "A family that truly loves all its members equally doesn't steal from one to give to the other. It doesn't dismiss one child's dreams as dispensable while treating another's desires as emergencies. What destroyed our family wasn't this meeting. It was the lifetime of choices that made you and our parents believe my future was less valuable than your want for a specific house right now." The room fell silent. After a moment, Uncle Jake added a final stipulation to the agreement: my parents would need to begin family counseling before any steps toward reconciliation could occur. To my surprise, they agreed without protest, perhaps finally recognizing the depth of the damage they had caused. 3 days later, I received confirmation of the wire transfer, $120,000 deposited into my new account at a different bank. I immediately contacted Stanford, explaining that unforeseen family circumstances had delayed my payment but had now been resolved. After reviewing my situation, they agreed to hold my spot for the upcoming semester, though I would need to attend orientation 2 weeks late. As I confirmed my acceptance, I felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief at recovering my opportunity, grief for the family relationships that would never be the same, and a new sense of strength that came from finally demanding the respect I deserved. The Stanford Business School campus was even more beautiful than the virtual tours had suggested. Sandstone buildings with terracotta roofs stretched across meticulously maintained grounds, palm trees swaying gently in the California breeze. It should have been a moment of pure triumph as I wheeled my luggage toward the graduate housing complex, yet my emotions remained complicated. I had imagined this moment for years, arriving at Stanford, beginning my MBA journey, stepping into the future I had worked so hard to create. In those daydreams, my parents had been proud and supportive, perhaps helping me move in, or at least calling with enthusiastic well wishes. Instead, our communication had been reduced to formal texts and carefully worded emails, the emotional fallout from our confrontations still raw and unresolved. Uncle Jake had driven me to the airport, helping with my luggage and slipping an envelope into my carry-on just before I went through security. "Don't open it until you're settled in California," he had said, hugging me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Samantha. Not just for getting into Stanford, but for standing up for yourself when it counted." That envelope now sat on my new desk in my small but comfortable university apartment. After unpacking my essentials and meeting my roommate Maya, a former management consultant from Atlanta, with a warm laugh and an impressive collection of business books, I finally allowed myself to open Jake's gift. Inside was a check for $5,000 with a note: "For unexpected expenses and occasional indulgences, your achievement deserves celebration. This is a gift, not a loan. Love, Uncle Jake." Beneath the check was a framed photo of me at age 8, proudly displaying a school achievement award. Jake stood beside me, beaming with genuine pride. I hadn't remembered the photo being taken, but seeing it now, evidence that someone had always seen my value brought tears to my eyes. My first week at Stanford passed in a blur of orientation sessions, introductory classes, and getting to know you events with my cohort. I threw myself into every activity, partly from genuine enthusiasm, and partly to avoid the quiet moments when thoughts of my family situation would creep in. Maya noticed my tendency to overcommit, but didn't pry, instead offering her company during late-night study sessions and making sure I occasionally stepped away from my books to explore our new surroundings. It was during one of these exploratory walks around Palo Alto that I finally answered a call from my mother. We had exchanged brief texts since my arrival, but this was our first real conversation since the confrontation at Jake's office. "The house feels different without you in the same city," she said after awkward pleasantries. "I keep expecting to see your car pull up for Sunday dinner." "I'm not sure when I'll be back for a visit," I replied carefully. "The program is intense and flights are expensive. Your father and I would cover your ticket home, of course." The offer hung in the air, loaded with unspoken tension. Money from my parents now carried complicated implications. "Thank you, but I'd prefer to pay my own way," I said. After a pause, I asked the question that had been weighing on me. "Have you started the counseling sessions, the ones Jake included in our agreement?" My mother sighed. "We've had 2 sessions so far. It's difficult. The therapist asks challenging questions about our parenting choices." "And Brielle, is she participating?" "She attended the first session but found it too upsetting. She says she feels villainized for accepting help from her parents." I bit back my instinctive response about the difference between normal parental help and taking someone else's education fund. Instead, I said, "The agreement requires her participation too." That was non-negotiable. "She'll come around," my mother said without much conviction. "The therapist is speaking with her individually next week." The conversation continued in this vain surface-level updates, with careful avoidance of deeper emotions, like skaters circling a thin spot in the ice. When we hung up, I felt drained, rather than connected, the gulf between us still vast and uncertain. As weeks turned into months, I found unexpected solace in the demanding pace of the Stanford program. The rigorous coursework, collaborative projects, and networking events left little time for dwelling on family drama. I formed close friendships with classmates who shared my ambition and work ethic, particularly Maya, who became something of a surrogate family. When Thanksgiving approached and returning to Chicago felt too complicated, she insisted I join her family in Atlanta instead. "My parents already have the guest room ready for you," she said, waving away my protests. "My mom is excited to have another ambitious daughter at the table to brag about. Consider it a cultural exchange. You can experience a genuine Southern Thanksgiving." That Thanksgiving with the Jefferson family showed me what supportive family dynamics could look like. Maya's parents asked thoughtful questions about my studies and career goals, expressed genuine interest in my perspectives, and treated Maya and her siblings with equal respect and celebration of their different paths. Watching their interactions was both healing and painful, a glimpse of what family relationships could be at their healthiest. By Christmas, my parents had completed 2 months of weekly therapy sessions, with Brielle reluctantly attending most of them. Our conversations remained stilted, but were gradually becoming more substantial. My father, typically stoic about emotional matters, surprised me during one call by admitting the therapist had helped him recognize patterns in his own upbringing that had influenced his different treatment of his daughters. "My father always made it clear that showing weakness or needing help was unacceptable," he explained awkwardly. "When you were so capable and independent, I interpreted that as strength and left you to manage alone. When Brielle struggled, I stepped in because I saw that as my job as her father. I never considered that you might need support too, even if you didn't ask for it as loudly." It wasn't a complete revelation or transformation, but it was the first acknowledgement of the dynamic that had shaped our family for decades. Brielle and I had our first direct conversation in February, almost 6 months after the confrontation. It started tensely, with her still defensive about her role in the situation. "Everyone's acting like I masterminded some scheme," she complained. "I just wanted a house. Parents help their kids buy houses all the time." "With their own money, Brielle, not with money taken from their other child," I pointed out. There was a long pause before she responded, her voice smaller. "I didn't think about it that way at the time. I just saw it as all family money, like what's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. That's how it always worked with us growing up." "No, that's not how it worked," I corrected her. "What was mine became yours whenever you wanted it. What was yours remained exclusively yours." Another silence stretched between us. The therapist said something similar. she finally admitted. She asked me to make a list of times I'd shared my resources with you, versus times you'd given up things for me. I couldn't think of many examples for the first category. It wasn't an apology, but it was a glimmer of self-awareness that had never been present before. As winter turned to spring, I threw myself into an intensive project for my entrepreneurship class, developing a business plan for a financial education platform specifically designed for young women from families with unhealthy money dynamics. The project was therapeutic, transforming my personal experience into a potential resource for others facing similar challenges. My professor, Dr. Eleanor Hamilton, took a particular interest in the project, staying after class one day to discuss it further. "This addresses a real need, Samantha," she said, reviewing my market research. "The intersection of family psychology and financial education is underexplored, especially for young women." "It's personal for me," I admitted, briefly explaining my experience without revealing all the family details. She nodded thoughtfully. "The most impactful business ideas often emerge from personal challenges. Have you considered applying for the Social Impact Venture Fund to develop this further after graduation?" The suggestion planted a seed that would continue to grow throughout my second year at Stanford, the possibility of turning my family's financial dysfunction into something that could help others avoid similar pain. By the time graduation approached in my second year, the family landscape had shifted significantly. Regular therapy had created space for difficult conversations that would have been impossible before. My parents had begun to recognize and acknowledge the long-standing patterns of favoritism that had culminated in the taking of my savings. Brielle had started therapy of her own, working through her role in the family dynamic and her habit of financial dependency. The day before my graduation ceremony, my parents and Brielle arrived in California, their first visit since I'd started the program. The reunion was awkward but not hostile, with careful conversation over dinner at a restaurant near campus. "Your graduation ceremony is at 10 a.m. tomorrow," my father confirmed, checking his itinerary with characteristic precision. I nodded. "There's a business school reception afterward. Uncle Jake's flight gets in at noon, so he'll meet us there." "Jake's coming." My mother seemed surprised. "Of course. He's been my biggest supporter throughout this journey." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. The unspoken acknowledgement hanging between us, Jake had filled a role they should have occupied. Later that evening, as we walked back to their hotel, my mother linked her arm through mine, a gesture of physical connection she hadn't attempted since before the confrontation. "I want to tell you something, Samantha," she said quietly. "Something our therapist encouraged me to express directly." I waited, maintaining our slow pace along the palm-lined street. "I am deeply sorry for what we did," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Not just taking the money, though, that was terribly wrong, but for the lifetime of choices that made you feel less valued, less important than your sister." The apology, so long in coming, washed over me with unexpected emotional force. "We became so accustomed to your competence, your independence, that we failed to recognize it wasn't that you needed less love, it was that you asked for it differently," she continued. "We've been working to understand how we created such an unbalanced family system and how we can do better going forward." I didn't respond immediately, letting her words settle into the space between us. "Thank you for saying that," I finally said. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it." "Your father struggles more to articulate these things, but he feels it too," she added. "Watching you walk across that stage tomorrow will be one of the proudest moments of our lives, not because of what it says about us as parents, but because of who you've become despite our failures." The graduation ceremony the next day was everything I had dreamed of during those years of saving and sacrifice. As I accepted my diploma, I spotted my family in the audience, my parents Brielle and Uncle Jake all together for the first time since the confrontation. Each face reflected a different aspect of my journey: my parents' complicated pride, Brielle's uncertain support, and Jake's unambiguous celebration of my achievement. At the reception afterward, my father awkwardly but sincerely congratulated me, mentioning that he had read every article I'd sent about my final project on financial education. Brielle, making a genuine effort, presented me with a painting she had created specifically for my new office, an abstract representation of resilience and growth that showed more thought than any gift she had given me before. Uncle Jake pulled me aside during a quiet moment, his expression serious despite the festive atmosphere. "I want you to know something, Samantha. What happened with your family was never about your worth. It was about their limitations. The way you handled it with dignity and determination shows exactly why you'll succeed wherever you go next." As we prepared to leave the reception, my father cleared his throat, gaining everyone's attention. "I'd like to make an announcement," he said formally. "Your mother and I have established a scholarship fund at Stanford Business School. It's called the Samantha Parker Resilience Scholarship, and it's specifically for students who have overcome significant family financial obstacles to pursue their education." The unexpected gesture left me momentarily speechless. It wasn't just the financial commitment it represented, but the public acknowledgement of what had happened and their role in it. It was perhaps the most meaningful amends they could offer, transforming their mistake into an opportunity for others facing similar challenges. Later that evening, as I packed my apartment for my upcoming move to San Francisco, where I'd accepted a position with a progressive financial technology company, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had nearly derailed my future had ultimately led to healing long festering family wounds, developing my own strength and boundaries, and even inspiring a professional direction I might never have discovered otherwise. The family I had now wasn't the perfect supportive unit I had longed for throughout childhood. It was imperfect, still healing, requiring ongoing work and vigilance to maintain healthier patterns. But it was more honest, more self-aware, and ultimately more capable of genuine connection than the facade we had maintained for decades. As I carefully wrapped the frame containing that childhood photo with Uncle Jake, I thought about the words he had shared during our last lunch before he returned to Chicago. "Some broken things, when repaired with care and intention, become stronger and more beautiful at the broken places." My family relationships had been broken in the most painful way possible. The repair work was far from complete, but through the breaking and beginning of repair, I had found my own strength, my voice, and a clarity about my worth that no one could ever take from me again. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your hard work or generosity? I'd love to hear how you handled it in the comments. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding personal strength. Remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love most, but those boundaries can ultimately lead to healthier relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to stand up for your worth in every relationship in your life.